Hey everyone, I finished watching the next VR Troopers episode, Small But Mighty. I'm really happy this week because not only was the Ninja Storm episode really good, but the VR Troopers episode was also really good. So yeah, two really good episodes. It's been a while since I've had two episodes at the same time that I've been really enthusiastic about. So, plot summary. This episode has some dude demonstrating to Carl Zichter how this new device that he's developed works. It can turn someone younger. And there's a cool little touch here where Carl Zichter reveals a bit of a vulnerability. The guy says, we need a test subject. And he looks at Carl Zichter's pet iguana, and he takes the iguana and he's like, it doesn't hurt, does it? And that's such a neat little touch. We never get to see like any moments of humanity from Carl Zichter or Grimlord. He's always such an over-the-top villain. This really adds a lot to him, I think. He's always had like a bit of an affection for his pet iguana, but it's never been like shown that he actually cares about it. In the past, like he likes having it, he pets it, he carries it around with him, and he named it Juliet, and that's funny. But he's never really shown that he actually cares for it, and that's really cool. So anyway, the guy insists that hey, it doesn't hurt. So then they zap the iguana, it shrinks to a younger iguana, and then it turns back to normal. And Carl Zichter is like, yep, this is my new idea. So he goes to virtual reality, and oddly they use the alternate voiceover here. I don't know why occasionally they'll use the alternate voiceover, let's see, what is it he says? Take me back to my virtual reality. Yeah, sometimes they'll use a different version. Usually it's just stock. Like they'll use the same clip, the same voiceover, but once in a while it's different, and I don't know why they do that. Moving on. Let's see. So he explains to his minions his new plan to turn the troopers into children using the device from earlier. The troopers are at Tau Dojo, and they receive a package. They open it up, and it's Grimlord's device zaps them, turning them into children. And then they're attacked by Skugs. They manage to fight off the Skugs, and they're about to take the device to Hart's lab when Jeb walks in. He doesn't recognize them at first. And I thought here they might say something about Jeb, like, can smell that it's still them, but he doesn't. Also, I kept expecting the device would zap Jeb and Jeb would turn into a puppy, but nope, that doesn't happen. Maybe they couldn't find a puppy in time, or maybe they honestly just didn't think of it. So, or maybe they needed like a trained dog on the same level as Jeb. Jeb really doesn't need to be here. He doesn't do a whole lot. He just kind of disappears after this. So anyway, the troopers get outside and realize they can't ride their motorcycles anymore because they're too short. So, they take bikes instead. I have no idea where they got the bikes from. They have matching helmets. Did they steal these? I think they might have stolen these bikes. Commandeered them for a greater good. Anyway, Percy is nearby, and he goes up and tells them that he thinks he recognizes them. And the troopers pretend not to know him. Percy knows there's something weird going on, and very strangely, he says, I'm going to follow you. At least he's giving them the warning, I guess. This is very weird. I don't think this would work today. Even then, I'm thinking, yeah, this was weird. Percy, don't follow kids around. Don't do that. Oh, and here's where Jeb comes back. Jeb decides to create a distraction. So they're riding their bikes, and then suddenly they hear a horn honk. They turn. Jeb is driving Percy's car. All right. So they lose Percy. They get to the lab. And, oh yeah, also Percy crashes into some kid's lemonade stand. That doesn't really go anywhere, it's just a thing that happens. Whatever. Percy is handled better than he usually is, which is really saying something considering he goes up to some kids he supposedly doesn't know and tells them that he's going to follow them. Yeah, that's how bad Percy's been treated so far. So anyway, they get to the lab, and at first, Professor Hart doesn't recognize them, and there's a neat part where Professor Hart is like, it is you kids, and then he raises his hand up. I think this is the first time we see his hand. On the Metal Heroes wiki, it says that it is, yeah, it's the first time we see an arm. So, apparently he has a whole body. He's not just a head and shoulders on the screen. So then, let's see. The troopers try transforming, and it turns out, yep, they can transform, but only for a limited time. And one of the really cool things, when they transform, the transformation sequence has the kids' faces included. That's really cool, because they could have just cut ahead to them fully transformed, but they went the extra mile and actually worked in the kids' faces into the transformation. That was a really nice touch. I really liked that. And so Grimlord's attacking, so the troopers go to stop them, and Caitlin and JB battle a new monster. Ryan takes on the air and ground assault. JB defeats the monster just in time as their time's running out. They join Ryan up in the skyship, and just then their powers run out, they can't transform. But fortunately, they're able to beat the last of the sky assault and they return to the lab. Hart tells them that he's found a way to return them back to their real ages. But then they're like, we don't want to turn back just yet. They want to stay kids so they can run around the lab and fool around and make a mess. Because there's some things you can only get away with as a kid. I like that. That's a neat little bit. So, really, really good episode. It is such a breath of fresh air from the previous so many formulaic episodes. And it's also a nice little peek into the future, because so much of this is very reminiscent of Beetleborgs. I'm wondering if this was possibly like a bit of a testing ground for what they would eventually do in Beetleborgs. Because, let's see, this would have been right around the same time, I think, that they were doing Rangers Back in Time, or some of the later episodes of Mighty Morphin, and after that, yeah, Beetleborgs would be shooting next. And, let's see. Oh yeah, interesting thing here. The kid who plays young JB was in Power Rangers. He was Zach's student in the Mighty Morphin episode Birds of a Feather. And interesting thing, at the beginning of that episode, you can see young Ryan in the karate class. That is so cool to see. Also, odd thing with that episode, every time there's a cut at the scene at the beginning where he's in the karate class, there's these two people walking into the juice bar, and every time it cuts, they keep walking in. Very weird. So they just keep walking in, then off screen, they'll get back, and then whenever it cuts back, you'll see them walk in again. I guess they were short on extras that day or something. The girl who played young Caitlin, I have no idea who it is. They look really familiar, so I'm wondering if maybe they were in some episode of something. Maybe they were in a VR Trooper episode, or they were in a Beetleborgs episode. Could they have possibly been in Power Rangers, or some movie from around that time? I have no idea, but they look really familiar, and I can't place her. I don't know who she is. And I don't think her actress's name is listed anywhere. On the Metal Heroes wiki, it just says question mark for their actors. They're usually... Saban, in those early days, they could usually find pretty decent child actors when they needed to. Let's see. I like Percy's role this time around. But yeah, it's kind of dumb. Oh yeah, and also, I really like Jeb driving Percy's car around somehow. I like that they weren't afraid to just lean into the absurdity of what was going on. That's another thing that reminds me a lot of Beetleborgs. I think maybe this episode really showed them that, yeah, you can lean into the absurdity and silliness and still do a good superhero show. So anyway, when I was on the Metal Heroes wiki about this episode, I found this. Quote, "If the troopers riding their motorcycles or cars as kids is wrong, why is Jeb, a dog, allowed to drive Caitlin's car?" Few things wrong there. Wasn't it Percy's car? Also, and the main problem with this thing is kind of why I stopped using the Wikipedia sites. It's not that riding the motorcycles or car were wrong, it's that they physically couldn't. JB gets on his motorcycle and Caitlin says you can't even reach the pedals. Because he can't. He's a little kid now. These are vehicles designed for adults. That's why they swipe some bikes. However, by that logic, Jeb shouldn't be able to drive a car either. He has the same physical limitations, but it's the tone shifts, and it made me think about a couple months ago, Mysterio Fusion, who does Dragon Ball Dissection, did a video talking about like tone and violence and things like that in Dragon Ball. I think it was in the episode where he covered the fight between Spopovich and Videl. Videl is in a brutal fight. She's getting punched in the face, her teeth like get broken, she's bloody and messed up, and it is really disturbing. And then like if it works for the context of that story. But then earlier on in the original Dragon Ball, there's a scene where Lunch turns into her angry blonde form, pulls the gun out of nowhere, and shoots Goku and Krillin, and they have cartoon bullet holes. Oh, and Roshi, I think, was also there. But they're totally fine. They're not even hurt. They're totally fine by the next panel. And the way that works is the tone can change. The tone in Dragon Ball was more silly. Yeah, there's occasionally stakes. Characters can get hurt, characters can die, but it's very different from the tone that Dragon Ball Z was going for. And I think that applies here, where at the beginning, the troopers can't take a motorcycle or their cars because like the tone at that moment. With Jeb, he's a sillier character. He can bend the rules. The rules can shift depending on what tone they're going for. Here, it's a goofy tone. Earlier on, it was more serious at the moment. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like they can easily switch between the two. I'm really bad at detecting humor sometimes, but I get this just fine. Anyway, a more thoughtful post on the wiki was about where the troopers got their bikes and helmets, and my idea. I had two thoughts. Possibly these were stored in a garage somewhere. They're not that old. They're only in their late teens, early 20s at the most. So most likely, oh, and also they live in a suburban town. They probably have garages. They probably had bikes from when they were a kid that from when they were kids that are still sitting in there somewhere. Uh, the other is what I said earlier. They probably stole the bikes. Um, uh, they probably gave them back. Um, Not a whole lot else to say about this one. This is a really good episode. I definitely recommend it. Um, Also, if you're not a VR Troopers fan, but you're a Beetleborgs fan, I'd say give this episode a watch, because it really feels like it's setting some of the groundwork for what they would do later on Beetleborgs. So, coming up next is the Dark Heart multi-parter. That's cool. Also, I completely forgot about Darkheart. They introduced him way early on, and then just dropped him completely, but they're gonna bring him back now. No idea why they had him gone for so long. I think it would have been nice to have him hang around a little bit, be mentioned, show up in a few battles between then and now, but whatever. It's cool to have him back, and I remember these episodes being really good. I'm hoping they hold up as well as they do in my memory, because lately that hasn't been as reliable. So, hope you enjoyed this. See ya.